So weird.
Does that mean I have another?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.
I just know that.
This is Angela Staunton. We have some people here in person. We have Rebecca Fournier. We have Jeanette Bartley, Mel Locks, Beth Cliffel. Did I say that right? We have Shelley Tuari and Hunter Stuckemeyer. And it looks like online, thank you for being here. We have Chris May, Anwar, we have Heather, Joyce, Lanuda, and Todd. So thank you so much. I've uploaded the most recent draft of the faculty observation form. As you know, there's been a couple drafts. We started this, I think about a year ago, and have made a lot of progress with the professional development committee. And more recently, we kind of worked alongside both Mel and Jeanette to kind of, make it a little bit more up to date, more relevant to what our peer institutions are doing. And this is a great time to just give overall feedback on the form, because I know there's lots of questions, and both Jeanette and Mel can answer any of those as well. I'm wondering, do you all have a copy at home that you can view? I've got the one on here. I can kind of click through if you need to.
Did this come with an email, Angela, or no?
No, but I could actually just email it out to you right away. Everyone that's here, I could just email it.
Angela, if
yes.
I may, folks can also just click on the top right side of the screen. There's a button that says download, and if folks click it, then they can download a copy right away from Blackboard.
That's a new feature, Daniele. Thanks for letting us know, sharing that. Let's see that. It does. I hope that. So were you all able to do that from your office or home computer?
Yes, it works great.
Perfect. Okay. So feel free to raise your hand if you have a comment or question, and we'll just kind of field through those questions as we go. Any other input from the audience? All right. And we are recording, so we can go back if we need to listen. I will, pardon? Yes, I do. Oh, I made copies. Do you want, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't do it. Pardon? Thanks, okay. So I will just start off by saying I do remember one bit of feedback back in December, I think when we presented it to Senate, was a glossary of terms, correct? We wanted to add that, so there's some language that's newer, updated, so people could have a glossary to refer to before their observation, just to make sure they know the the understanding of each of these newer terms if applicable. And anyone else remember any other feedback?
I remember someone saying that they wanted more than 3 columns.
Okay.
I would point out that we started with more than 3 columns, and the committee said, no, that's too many columns. So there's that, so I don't know what to do with that, but that is feedback I remember.
Sure. So I can just reiterate what Mel said. One of the other bits of feedback was to provide more columns in the exemplary, proficient, emerging areas. And when we had worked as a committee, we kind of didn't want to go back to additional columns. We liked the 3. If there's any feedback on that, let us know.
Oh, another comment that I remember from that meeting was about, this is not the latest version. The concern.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the concern that this, because remember the latest version had the
The lines?
The lines, yeah. And so one of the concerns was that people thought that it looked like a checklist, and I had to chime in and say this is not meant to be a checklist. And that's actually mentioned on the first page, but maybe it needs to be, I don't know, reiterated or something, I don't know.
Okay, so I guess the one that, let me see what's in here. If this is, maybe the paper copies. Oh, this is the one. The one that they
that's the
see,
right one.
yeah,
Oh.
is the correct one. Sorry about that. I grabbed the wrong.
Yeah, this is an earlier version.
So Mel just mentioned the lines, kind of just looking at formatting, that people did like it or didn't like it.
They were talking about it as though it were a checklist. Like, well, I don't do this particular thing in my field, but it was not ever meant to be a checklist. And it says that on the first page, but
Okay.
maybe the lines are causing some confusion.
Sure. Hi,
Hey, Angela.
how are you guys?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Those online, we have Kelvin Washington and we have Dr. Griffin that just walked in.
What are you talking about today?
So we're talking about the faculty observation form.
Oh,
Yeah, big doings. So anyone online have any questions, comments?
Angela, I have a question. Are we supposed to comment on just what we see on the screen, or can we just give general comments? What type of feedback are you looking for?
General comments are perfect, yeah.
Okay, so I'll just start with something that I see on the screen, and that was a comment that I had also back in December. So if you look at the very top line, it says, class begin and ends on time, and you can be exemplary at that, or class begin and ends on time, and you can be proficient at that. And I don't think that there is enough of a distinction between criteria there to really justify why one may be exemplary or proficient at the same thing with the same words.
Angela, is it okay if I speak to that?
Yeah, I'd love you to, yeah. Do you want to come closer maybe?
Sure, yeah. Who was that? Was that?
That was Danielle.
This is Daniele.
Hi, Danielle. I don't know if you guys can see me or not, but I wanted to
They
speak
can.
to that if that's okay. Just because what we're actually trying to do here is have these the columns be sort of inclusive. So you may not meet everything in one particular column, right? So you might just have more things in the proficient column than in the exemplary column. So it's entirely possible that two things would be identical for exemplary or proficient. So you could have an overall proficient in this category with class beginning and ending on time, or you could have an overall exemplary in this category with class beginning and ending on time. They're not meant to be individual line items. They're meant to be components of a larger column.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
no, it doesn't make sense. How would an evaluator then assess someone who started and ended their class on time? Would you mark both exemplary and proficient?
Oh, that's a great question. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah.
So this is Jeanette speaking. I'll just stay where I am. So the way you will look at that is, okay, so the class begins and ends on time. So you know from that you're probably going to be looking at exemplary or proficient. Then as you're looking at the rest of the class, you're going to basically highlight or make note about what you're seeing that will put that person in proficient or in exemplary with the class starting and ending on time. If the class doesn't start on time or it doesn't end on time, that person or that for that observation you're starting with emerging. That doesn't mean that the entire class period is emerging, right? I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly. It's a little difficult. So if I'm looking at this, I'm not looking at it as a checklist. I'm not saying the class starts ends on time, then the next line, then the next line. I'm looking at the class overall. And based on what I see, then I go back to the rubric and then say the class started ending on time, they did this, they did that. Oh, that's mainly proficient. Or, oh, that's mainly exemplary. I'm not necessarily sitting with this while I'm in the observation and checking off what I see. It's more of I'm going to take notes in the observation, make note of what I'm seeing, and then go back to this form and then say, okay, the class began and ended on time. They also did this, they did this, they did this. That puts them in profession.
But
For example.
if I can mention also, this,
Go ahead, Calvin.
you're looking at it as, we're not doing one by one.
Right.
Diana, it's really, it's the category. And you need supporting evidence to confirm why you say it should be one or the other. Basically what you just said. But and so if you're trying to compile all that, like I was looking here, that first category is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8. So obviously to help to support why you say it's exemplary, you can jot that information down. This will help you to prove that. If we're going one by one, then you're right. Yeah. How can I say they begin on time, they end on time? Right? If
Yeah,
we're not
but
doing
it still makes for a really bad evaluation process. You have two criteria. They're meant to be separate, or else why do you have two criteria? With
They're
the
not
same
two
language.
They're
Okay,
not two
but-
criteria, that's why.
Just let me get through it, okay? So question number one, if they're not two criteria, why are they on two different columns? Question number two, if you need objective data, as Calvin said, to measure when a class ends and when a class begins, and the objective data tells you that the class ends on time and begins on time, then how are you going to go about checking whether it's proficient or whether it's, I forget what the other criterion is, exemplary. And then to Jeanette's point, it sounds like you're filling out that form retroactively. And so we're leaving it to the arbitrary decision of the observer, whether the class started or ended on time, and whether you're going to choose whether that start or end, which was on time given the data, is going to count as an exemplary or as a proficient. I think that there is an inherent issue with this form. To give you a counterexample, if I were to tell my students, hey, if you turn in this paper on time, you get an A, and if you turn in this paper on time, you get a B. And then I get to decide whether I give them an A or a B.
No.
It's holistic.
That's not what I was referring to. I was saying that is just one of the things you're going to be looking at as it relates to giving them the rating that the evaluator said it should have. I was not referring to the first one. Okay, start on time and end on time. You do that, then you're gonna get exemplary. No, there's some other things associated in that category that put it in the position to be rated one way or the other. And these are some of the things that we left out there.
To Daniele's point though, and then we'll talk to Beth. I mean, what if we just on the proficient line said the instructor begins or ends class on time, and it's the same as emerging instead?
Because you wouldn't, that wouldn't be emerging,
But
that would be proficient. I mean, that would be,
Beth, go ahead.
About the actual bare minimum, holding class to time is essential. So if you are proficient or you're exemplary, then that has to happen. So
Okay.
it doesn't, you know what I'm saying? Like, if you're not holding class to the time, then you're not either of those things.
it's necessary
That's
but
how I
not
see it.
sufficient.
It's like,
It's necessary but not
Sufficient.
sufficient is what Beth said for having the same statement in both categories.
Because you're looking at a
Yeah,
holistic-
but okay. So I just want to say that it's necessary but not sufficient means that you don't get to say, okay, I don't want to get into the weeds of logic, but if it's necessary but not sufficient to be on time with beginning on end to get proficient, then what is sufficient so that you are exemplary?
The whole category,
Whole category.
holistically.
That's right.
Okay, but the ending and starting on time is one part of the whole category. So how are you
Correct.
going to decide whether that bit falls into the whole that is exemplary or into the whole that is proficient?
Based on the rest of the category. It must be a holistic decision.
It's in addition to the other criteria that are listed there. So you can start class and end class on time. That's one piece of it. I have to meet the rest of that in proficient, and basically none of the exemplary for it to fall as proficient, or vice versa. It's going to be exemplary because it falls there with all the other stuff that's in exemplary.
Okay, but then there is not a, let's assume that that's a valid way of organizing an observation form, and I'm not saying that I agree with that statement. But even assuming that that's the way we want to run this form, then this category of beginning or ending class of time should not be, together with the rest of the category, should be marked as a consequence of the evaluation that you give on all the other criteria, because the other criteria are distinguished between exemplary and proficient. So what you're telling me is when I go and evaluate someone or observe their class, if I give them a majority of exemplary, then as consequence of that, I will also give them an exemplary on whether their class begins or ends on time. But if I give them a majority of proficient, then I'll give them a proficient even though their class begins and ends on time. So it shouldn't be a gradient 1 category, it should be a gradient 2 category.
No, imagine for a second that I'm going back through this. I'm looking at my notes and I'm checking things off as I go through, and I go, yep. And I go, okay, that's how many I have in exemplary. Let me look at proficient. Yep. Oh, I've got more exemplary than I do proficient. This is clearly a case where they've gone above and beyond. It's not like a thing that I choose after the fact. It's in the category. So if it's in the category and they've done it, I can go ahead and say, yep, it's there.
I object to that. That's not what Jeanette said. And in addition to that, there is a logical fallacy there, because the category of starting and ending on time is one of the parts that allows you to decide whether that person has a majority of categories in proficient, or whether that person has a majority of category in exemplary. To give you an example, right? Let's assume that there is a odd number of categories. Let's assume that the categories are 9, and you get 4 categories of proficient and 4 categories for exemplary. Then the one category on whether or not the class starts on time tilts the scale on whether that evaluation ends in proficient or exemplary. That's why it's not a good category as first gradient category. It can either be a second gradient, it's based on the rest of the categories, or the language needs to be distinct enough between proficient and exemplary. In the old form, we used to have degrees. We used to have starts and ends on time, or starts 5 minutes late or thereabout, and ends 5 minutes late or thereabout, and then it either doesn't start or doesn't end on time. This category, as it's written, will not allow you, unless we default to the arbitrary decision of the observer, to decide whether that class started and ending on time, and so it's proficient or exemplary.
There's nothing arbitrary here. Either the class starts on time or it doesn't start on time.
There is something arbitrary, because you can grade it as proficient or exemplary. This we gotta,
Both. It's both.
So you check both.
Yes.
I know. I think it's a tough one here. Hunter wants to say something.
It's not a tough one. It's a logical issue.
So when I first read it, I had the same concerns as Daniele. And it took me a bit to understand, it took me a couple minutes of reading and rereading it to understand the language and what was happening here. However, if it's that easy to confuse, sorry, I'm adding a suggestion. What if that's its own category, like the syllabus, where it's either proficient or emergent, you start or end class on time? If it's that difficult, maybe it's own.
Exemplary, proficient, it's just one thing.
It's just
So
one or the
Hunter
other.
made the suggestion, maybe we take that particular line, that statement, and putting it under its own category and just make it proficient or what was it?
Or emerging.
Or emerging.
What does the committee think of that?
Or you can even be like, meets expectations.
Well, my
or
whole
not
committee's
meet
not here.
Well, there are
Yeah.
other,
No.
Yeah,
the syllabus is
consistency.
proficient or emerging.
Yeah.
So if we're going by the
Yeah.
language,
Yeah.
I think proficient or emerging, like
This-
one or the other, you either start.
The
makes
syllabus is proficient or emerging, so we could take that line and put it under there and make it. Daniele, thoughts?
Yeah, that works for me. It would be a good logical consequence. I don't have a preference on how it may get changed. I think that the committee, is stuffed with bright people, and I have complete faith in them. It's just that if I think of using this form to observe someone, I wouldn't be able to choose one or the other.
I just want to point out, some of this, Daniela, would be resolved once we get to the training session. As I understand that there's going to be some training in how we use this form, so some of that would be resolved. But I understand your point about class ending and starting.
Yes. Did you guys hear what Shelley said online? That a lot of this would be resolved in the training, but I mean, we're still looking at wordsmithing right now. So, yeah.
But actual use of the form would be covered.
That's an easy fix. If the committee is good with that, then I think that's an easy
Yeah.
way to just bypass the whole discussion.
Yeah, so we'll write down that was a suggestion. I'm meeting with my committee next Thursday, and all the suggestions that are made today and next week, we will bring to the committee to make sure everybody's in agreement. All right. Any other comments, questions, clarification?
Angela, I first wanted to thank you for bringing that back to the attention of the committee. I do have several. I have them marked as comments on a PDF document of the evaluation form, and I'd be happy to share that with you because I don't want to monopolize the conversation here.
No, that's fine. Do I make him?
No, I think he means he wants to send it to you for the committee.
Oh, you want to send it to the committee, not share it now?
Either way, whatever you think I can do both, send it to the committee and give comments here, or send it to the committee exclusively, or give comments here exclusively, whatever you think it's
Let's do it right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Calvin said, yeah, let's do it. Let's duke it out. Let's do it.
All right, page 1, bullet points 2 and bullet points 3 and 4. So there is the novelty of this post-observation form. This used to be the case, at least in my experience at Triton. Yeah, page 1, third and fourth bullet point. It used to be the case, at least in my experience at Triton, that the post-observation meeting was for tenure track faculty only, not for tenured folks who would then, be on their 2-year routine revision. That also involved in the next category, bullet point 4. I was wondering if you could give us a sense of why this post meeting is now mandated.
Jeanette has a response.
So you're correct in terms of the post-observation happening with non-tenured or tenure track, but in the faculty handbook, it does say that there is a post-observation debrief conversation for all instructors in the faculty handbook.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what Jeanette said. I apologize.
Oh,
Yeah.
So sorry.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now, Daniele?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, sorry about that. I said you're correct in terms of for tenure track, we do the post-observation, we do the full process, but in the faculty handbook, it does state that there's a pre-brief, the observation, and a debrief conversation or post-observation for all faculty, whether you're tenured or non-tenured. It's in the faculty handbook.
Gotcha.
So that's why it's if that helps.
Sure. Yeah, that explains. My next one is on page 5. The second category, the one that states the instructor uses multimodal learning strategies. I was wondering if you could clarify what multimodal learning strategies may be.
That's probably something we would want to address in the glossary.
Yeah, we would
basically using different ways, right? Different
that terminology
methods. Yeah,
would
different methods of
that terminology would be in the glossary. And again, different methods of providing content for our students. So whether it's formative assessments, whether it's a YouTube video, a 1-minute paper, and it could be any type of teaching strategy that is what encompasses multimodal learning strategies.
Gotcha. So other than frontal lecture, anything else would count as multimodal.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next one is on page 6, the second category, the one that says the instructor makes in-the-moment adjustments. I was wondering how an observer could decide whether an instructor is making in-the-moment adjustments or that's just the way the class proceeds.
Can you tell me the title of that?
Yeah, our pages are different.
I think our pages are different. What's at the top? What criterion?
It's assessment of learning, the
Okay,
larger
I see it.
block, and it's the second category in
in-the-moment
assessment of
adjustment.
learning.
Yeah, that is very specific.
Sorry, I'm still looking for
Are the wording different or just the lines in the new one? Did you change the wording too, or is it just the lines?
some of the wording was simplified for that, so that it's.
I found it on page 5 in our handout. Review of online course under exemplary is the second bullet. The instructor makes at the moment decisions to address students' level of understanding, including teaching blah, 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 blah. It may be a slight different wording, but that's what's here.
Well, I think this is the most updated one. Yeah.
So can you read what that says there?
The instructor makes the in-the-moment adjustments to address students' understanding, including reteaching, collaborative activities, and other student-centered strategies.
Okay, it's the same here.
So Danielle, could you address?
Repeat
Can you repeat your question?
Yeah, I'll give you an example of something that I do in class. As you probably all do, at some point, you develop a routine that comprises, giving a statement with a point and then giving an example, right? So I think that for an observer, it would be hard to decipher whether I'm following the routine of making a point and giving an example, or whether I'm pivoting with an in-the-moment adjustment and therefore I'm giving an example. Or in addition to that, every time a student asks a question is an in-the-moment adjustment. So once again, taking it from the point of view of me going to observe a class taught by a newly hired adjunct faculty member, I'd have a hard time sorting out whether I am, looking at in-the-moment adjustment or whether that instructor always says the things and always comes up with those examples and therefore, they don't count as in-the-moment adjustments. I think that the spirit of the category, though, is meritorious. I think that the spirit of the category is trying to ask, is this instructor flexible? Is this instructor able to pivot on a point that students misunderstand or don't understand, to come up with alternatives to address that point, if I get that category right. I am just not persuaded that we can observe what in-the-moment adjustments are and what they are not.
I mean, the example of if you're observing a class and a topic comes up, happened last night, I mean, you're pivoting, because that wasn't planned when you put the syllabus together back several months ago. And when you observe the class, if a question comes up that's applicable to the subject matter, but something just came up, it just happened recently, and you're pivoting, because that wasn't planned, unless you told them the night before you're gonna be discussing that.
Yeah,
That's specifically what we're thinking about. A student asks a question, you address that question, and that leads.
Yes.
That's
and
what-
so I think maybe we agree to change it to is flexible or can make a pivot instead of the in the moment. What is it here? In the moment adjustments.
Could you not also put it from the perspective of the instructor is responsive to the students in terms of, like, like you look out and you see, cognitive dissonance. And you're like, okay, you guys aren't getting this.
Right.
Let me, you know what I mean? Like, that is another example of what we're describing here, but it's really about being responsive to the students and what they are demonstrating. Because if the students are just all nodding their head and you can just keep on with your plan, then you're responding to them saying, okay, we got this, right? I think that's what the core is really just focusing on that responsiveness to your students and what they're showing you. Because they might not be showing you, and how are you going to make an in-the-moment adjustment if they're not giving you that feedback, right? I mean, you can certainly have ways to pull it out of them, right, which I think is addressed in other bullet points. But I think this particular bullet point is really getting at that. At least that's how I interpret it.
Can I just,
Oh,
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, can't you just take out in the moment?
Yeah.
Or no?
Yes. I think we can.
Yeah.
Jeanette's like.
Or no, I'm looking at her, she's like,
The reason why I say the committee can make the decision. As an observer, as someone who's going to the classroom, there are times I can tell it's in the moment, and then some of this is gonna come out in the conversation we're having after. And I think that's the piece we have to remember, is that sometimes you're not gonna be able to see every piece as they're teaching, but when you're having a conversation with them, and Kelvin says, you know what, this student who never participated today, so I have to make a change in that moment in order to make sure I pull that student in. That also needs to be talked about, right? That needs to be captured. So yes, you observe it, but something's going to come out of conversation. But it is, I think, in the moment, that's a key phrase. Whatever you all decide is fine, but I'm just saying that is a key phrase when you talk about in the moment.
So did you guys hear Jeanette? And go ahead, Daniele.
Yeah, I just want to make a proposal. It sounds like from the discussion we're having that the distinction that we're trying to make between, say, somebody who is exemplary in this category or somebody who's proficient is between somebody who comes in with a class plan, right? So I know that I'm going to show a video, then I'm going to lecture a bit, then I'm going to give, a group assignment for another 30 minutes. And then no matter what happens in my class, I'm going to run with that plan. That person would be proficient. But somebody like Kelvin last night, right, comes in with a plan, and then you realize the students just don't understand a single thing. Then you are adaptive to sort of the feedback that the student give you, and that would make you exemplary. If that's the difference we're trying to mark off, which seems like that's what's coming out of Jeanette's contribution, for instance, then maybe we want to stress more than the momentary changes, the fact that the instructor is adaptive and realizes that maybe students need more of group work, or maybe students need more of a lecture at that one time than sticking with the plan that I made.
Yeah, adaptive, and Beth said earlier, responsive.
Yeah,
So I think,
that was a good summary.
Yeah. Jeanette said that was a good summary.
I have another one too.
We're ready.
All right, excellent. I do my homework. I just I apologize for the many points, but
No, do
you
not
ask for
apologize.
feedback, I go.
We have to go through it because we all want to be on the same page.
On the page that says review of online courses, there are only two categories, exemplary or emerging. In the exemplary category, it says the LMS shall include opportunities for synchronous or asynchronous interaction as appropriate. So I think that we are in a bind for that one also, because at the moment we're not offering synchronous online courses. And so I was wondering whether the idea of synchronicity there came out of, say, discussion boards, which I must say they're hardly synchronous, right? Or whether I often offer, by appointment virtual office hours for online classes, whether that is considered synchronicity. Because we're never going to find a course where I'm holding a lecture for 2 hours, because it's just not one of our formats for online courses.
Hunter?
So I know some professors will do like a synchronous office hour that is dedicated, that they try to dedicate to their online courses. I know not everyone has the flexibility to do that as often as we'd love to. But would that be what that is referring to?
I don't know. Would synchronous office hours be possibly some, professors do that? The only thing is, I can tell you some of this language was taken from the, yes, the Blackboard exemplary rubric. That, so it could be a matter of us eliminating that.
Wait, what was the concern? 'Cause
it's the one that says the LMS shall include opportunities for synchronous and or asynchronous interaction as appropriate, and we're not really offering synchronous.
You're not offering synchronous, but there are synchronous opportunities. You can have a blog, you have a discussion post, but they're in there at the same time doing the work.
That's asynchronous.
No, at the same
No,
time.
at the same time.
You could have a blog, Jeanette said,
You have some
that
activity
where,
they're
or
working
discussion.
together.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's synchronous, right?
I don't know. I honestly don't know that I would consider, say, my discussion boards synchronous, because they have 48 hours to complete them.
Yeah,
So-
discussion boards are asynchronous
Right,
for
that's
sure.
Okay.
But Jeanette is saying there can very well be opportunities for synchronous learning as well, right? Like a group project.
Yes, a
Right.
group
That's-
I was
project.
just gonna say, so
Beth.
like in my online class, I have students do case studies and they work on it as a group. And so I activate the collaborate option so that they can hop into the collaborate room if they want. And that is an opportunity for synchronous, but they can also just simply use the chat feature of the collaborate option, which would be asynchronous. It's really up to them, but the opportunity is there,
Okay.
right?
And we are
So-
saying and or.
Or alternatively, kind of coming back to Hunter's point, I will do, the first week of the semester, I always do an office hour kind of like meet and greet, but I can't require it, right? But the opportunity for them to come and it is there. So I think it's clear that we're saying opportunities, that they have the option, but that we're not requiring it, because we can't require synchronous time when it's an online class.
So Beth
And
mentioned,
or, I think addresses, that it's not required, or we can just take and out.
okay, Beth mentioned that, she offers like a case study group project where they have the option to be in a collaborate room, or that's more synchronous, or a chat, which would be more asynchronous. But Shelley just said we could just take the and or, and it could just be or.
But I think we can stick to that.
Because I do both, right? So, and is appropriate.
I mean, and or.
We're not saying and absolutely and, right?
Yeah.
And I think what you're saying also is really, really important. That we're not asking, do you do this? Absolutely. Do you mandate synchronous interaction? We're saying, do you offer an opportunity for them to do that if they choose to do that? Which I think is important, right? That's a really big distinction.
Mel kind of said, do we offer them the opportunity to have that synchronous interaction? But I would say that maybe not all instructors do, though. It's strictly a asynchronous course.
And that's where the or comes
So I think
Right, that's
my
what-
suggestion would be it should just be or, not and/or.
When you couldn't do or if you're saying that it's a asynchronous course, then
Oh.
required, then you would never have synchronous.
Yeah.
So I think and or is important because for those people that do it,
And or,
you would
okay.
have the and.
Okay.
People that don't do it synchronous, the or makes sense, and so you capture both groups of people.
Right.
Okay.
That's probably what we had.
I would make a suggestion that if there is a training session on or a training manual for this evaluation, then we specify what synchronous means. You know, there's things like group project, possibly offering synchronous conference hours, virtual conference hours, etc. I do have one last one. So on the broader category is the group is review of online courses once again. It's on the following pages. This category that we just discussed is the category that for exemplary begins with assessment activities occur frequently throughout the duration of the course, and instruction is modified based on the results of the assessment activities. Do you see that category?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So the problem with that one is that we are required to have a fully developed online course with all the assessment, with all the readings, with all the pre-recorded lecture before the semester begins. So if I want to make that runs counter to the statement that says instruction is modified based on the results of the assessment activities. And that's just conceptually, right? But on top of that, how is an observer who's given access to my online class for, say, a few hours or a few days going to see all the modifications that I've done, assuming that I've made them after the course has begun? So say, you know, I realize that my students are just terrible multiple choice questions, and so I'm going to go ahead and decrease number of multiple choice multiple choice questions in my future assessment. But I've done all of that before anybody has observed me potentially, or I might do all of that after. It just doesn't seem like we can assess whether there's been modification based on need for instruction on a asynchronous course.
I agree. I wonder if we said to make an adjustment, because for instance, sometimes there are instructions that might be unclear. And if I start to get a couple emails from students, then I'm like, okay, I address the whole class in an announcement, and then I adjust it in that little journal or assignment, whatever it is. So is it more of an adjustment?
But I think that the documentation is your announcement. That would be the evidence that an observer could see.
Sure.
That they see this announcement that you posted. They say, hey, I just got through the discussion board, and you clearly didn't understand this point, so I'm just going to address this as a class, or whatever it might be, right? And I think that for the most part, I think we do this, I know for my online classes, I do this on a weekly basis. So every Monday, I'm like, hey, I just finished grading your stuff from last week. These are the issues that I'm seeing. I realize that you guys don't understand this concept. How about this video? Maybe this will help. So I think that is, I don't know, it is evident when you look at that part of the course, but you're communicating that, right? If you're making adjustments based on your students' performance, hopefully you're communicating that to them. And that's the piece where you're showing that.
Yeah, or you're making comments when you're grading, and giving feedback after, reviewing an essay or a discussion board.
This is also something that becomes evident during our conversations with faculty members, right? When they're like, when I ask a faculty member sometimes, I noticed that you did this in your classroom. What is that about? Where's that coming from? And they'll be like, oh, let me tell you. I used to do it this other way, but then students started responding in this way, and so I made this adjustment. That's something that I can tell right then, okay, I can see that, and how they've structured something differently based on how the class is going as a whole. And I think everyone's constantly doing that. We're just looking for evidence of it.
Mel just mentioned that, after the observation, when you sit down with your dean, that those are things that you would note through those conversations with your dean. and, you know, there'll be lots of follow-up questions between instructor and the evaluator.
Yeah, I don't know who made the comment before Mel, but if feedback on papers or any form of test count for that category, if that's the intent of the category, then it should be added there. Because as I read it now, it doesn't look like if if somebody just bombs a question and they tell them, hey, for next time, try to approach it this way, if that's also to be accounted for in the modification of instruction, then maybe there is room for making it explicit.
Add some examples. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely making it more explicit would help. Thank you.
That was my last one. Thank you so much for indulging me.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Danielle.
These are helpful, Danielle.
Yes, it's helpful. Anyone else? Either in person or online. And again, thank you all for being here.
I just have one question. I understand the holistic thing where you're going through the column, but my concern is always I want to improve. So if I am proficient in something, will that be discussed in the meeting? Because I want to know how to improve it, because I know I'm not marking it off.
No
Okay.
matter where you fall, that's going to be discussed in the meeting.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, whether you're exemplary, proficient, or emerging, we're going to have a conversation about, hey, you're doing a wonderful job in this aspect, but have you considered this?
Okay.
That's always going to be part of the conversation.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because that's the goal, right? Is to get different perspectives.
I'm sure this is a larger conversation that we don't have time for today, but I think I have personally, and obviously I'm not going through the training right now of how to do this, but the distinction between the Blackboard approval process for an asynchronous course, kind of like Danielle was saying, like I think that's a large conversation we have to have in our professional development committee of how to make it a distinct, this is your course that you're running now versus the online process. Yeah. I just know from course designing.
Yeah.
How many courses?
A lot.
Many of this looks like what I've been looking at for a year and a half.
To your point and to Daniela's point, this may be a little extra work on the people observing, but I'm wondering if it would make sense that we have access to what you originally submitted. So your template that gets approved, we have access to that, and then what we're looking at this live. But it becomes part of the conversation.
But it wouldn't necessarily be the person who
Developed
who
it.
developed the course, teaching the course, and being observed in the course.
Yeah. Because I know I've been handed a shell that I've like made tweaks to based on either something that came out in the last like 3 months or like something that I'm like, that's not quite clear to me. I'm not sure how they're going to answer it. I'm not sure what I'm looking for in it, so I'll rephrase something.
But I think that's exactly what I'm saying though. Regardless of who created it, you still have a starting point. And then you made some changes based on what you just said, based on something new came out, or the students, you don't think the students in front of you will respond a certain way to what was already there. So I think it still could be important to see where it started.
Yeah.
And then the changes you make is now you have to explain why you made those changes. Right? So that's part of the conversation. I'm not saying that that's something we'll necessarily see when you look,
Yeah.
but that can be part of the conversation at the end.
I just think that would be very tedious.
That's why I said
That was my
earlier.
gut.
I said,
Yeah.
that's why I said I don't know if it'd be more work on the
Yeah.
observer. It was
Because I
just
know
a
like
thought.
going through the course approval process from as a peer reviewer, it's hours looking through that course, understanding where things, I mean, that would be a lot of work on the observers. And if you're observing a dozen different faculty, that's,
That's the point.
yeah, I don't know how feasible that would be.
Right. Yeah, that's the point.
For those online, did you hear the conversations we were having in person? Oh, okay. Thank you. Basically, they were kind of throwing around like, you know, after, of course, it has gone through the approval process, and if the observer could have access to what that shell looked like, and then maybe compare, the original shell to, the instructor who's now teaching that shell and looking at the tweaks of it. And Beth made a good point that basically that would be very tedious from the observer's perspective to really sit down and look at that, because Beth is a, what do you call it? Peer reviewer, and it takes hours to even go through that process. It's pretty like, whether it's going to be approved or not, right? And it may just be a little too much, I think, to have the observer do that. Makes sense and agree. Thank you, Heather. All right, it looks like we've got about 8 minutes left. Mel has a comment.
No, question.
Question.
That I would like to pose to everyone in attendance. We had this discussion about whether, so initially we had the form that looks like the one that's in front of me that doesn't have the like differentiated lines. And then the committee said, no, we need some more differentiation. So we put in the lines, and now I'm wondering, do we need to take those lines back out? Are they just creating confusion? So I just kind of like to get a sense of what people are feeling about the literal appearance of the
So Mel was just asking, like, as a whole, do you guys like how we put the lines here in every single statement, or do you like the form without the lines? That could be something, again, we bring back to the committee. We could kind of decide, because, yeah.
Like, what was the reasoning when lines were?
I don't know, maybe
visual. The committee felt
visually.
like it was difficult to like separate the individual items within each column. And so we were like, okay, let's visually separate them. But then it turned into something that looks like a checklist, and everybody went, oh no, we don't want a checklist. We don't like the checklist. So
Put an extra space between each bullet.
we don't
I like the formatting of the lines for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, I like the formatting. I think it looks cleaner.
Yeah.
I think it
That's
looks
how my
cleaner.
words look, so I think that's probably why it's familiar.
That's true.
Yeah.
Of course it's good, right?
Right? I mean,
Daniele likes it with the lines.
I would just say make sure that when you do the training, that there's an explanation, so people don't see that as a checklist, that you're looking at each one linearly, right? Because that's not the way it should look. So as long as that's explained, I think it's fine.
Sure.
I think too, the whole thing that gets me is I wasn't looking at it from a holistic point of view. My whole department didn't look at it that way. So, I don't know if that should be not said on the document, but said somewhere. So that's, oh, it is, okay.
That's on the first page.
Okay, okay, that's fine, that's fine. Yeah, no, I totally missed that, because then we were looking across like, well, if we're not good at this, then you would get a checklist.
You know what though? It doesn't use the word holistic, and maybe it needs to.
It's important, I think, because we were all, we're English majors, we're nerds.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, any other last questions or comments? I appreciate all the feedback. Again, we are having a second meeting. I already forgot. Next,
Wednesday.
is it Wednesday again?
Yes.
Okay.
I think they beat it.
Wednesday from, is it 3:30 to 4:30?
Yes.
I can't keep any dates in my head anymore.
3:30 to 4:30.
Okay. So, thank you. Let, department members know that we'll be meeting again, both online and in person. So thank you. And we will bring all this back to our committee, and hopefully we'll be sharing the updated form soon. Thank you, everybody here in person. I appreciate it. I used to appreciate all the feedback. So thank you. Have a great rest of your day.